So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do another debrief. You get to experience the carnage that happens after an SDL. I got my very good friend and sweaty leader, Mr. Richard Mueller, and we got talking about pricing on today's SDL. And it was really supposed to focus in on how do you set up pricing, what's your pricing set at, what do you do to try and adjust your pricing, do you allow discounts to dictate what happens in your pricing structures, short-term, long-term, things of that nature. We did get talking about it a little bit, but I think we ended up spending 30 minutes or better of the episode talking about what happens in the drive with regards to pricing when you're talking about competitive pricing or dealing with customers talking about pricing. So we did talk about it, but not as much manager level as I think both Richard and I would have liked. One of the challenges with pricing is that there's a lot of different ways to go about it. Now, a lot of good information came out today for folks who didn't or haven't experienced an SDL before. It was a good kind of intro because you had a lot of people talking, a lot of people giving input, so on and so forth. So that was good insights today. So I want to talk about a little bit about that. Richard, let me and let the folks know out there a little bit about your thoughts about the episode and what maybe one of your key takeaways was.
It was a lot of information to unpack, a lot of it, a lot of word tracking for the advisors. My biggest takeaway on it, though, was the embarrassment side of it, right? Like, I don't think your advisor should ever be embarrassed of what your labor rate is, be it a matrix labor rate or like just a flat labor rate across the board. There should be, at no point should the person selling the product be embarrassed by what the price point is. And then we didn't really go into how do you find out what like a good door labor rate is. It was basically you can either be too high and price yourself out of the market, or you can be too low and price yourself out of the market. There's kind of that sweet spot. It sounds like it's kind of more of a trial by fire for that sweet spot to hit. You got to do a lot of research in that. But my biggest takeaway was how do we get people to become comfortable with discussing money, frankly. That's a big training aspect of the service advisor role, and especially even from the tech side.
As big time, because that was one of the things that Roger brought up Roger was speaking, but somebody else brought it up. I can't remember who brought it up in the chat, and that was yes, big time impactful. That's effectively a sales objection that they were discussing. I think Roger's process was taking the cabin filters out, and the service advisor was like, well, I'm not selling them, right? It's $69.95. It's too high. And I think Roger's statement was, well, what do you think we should charge? And the advisor was like, half. It's like, oh, okay, I understand. You selling from your pocket or selling from your pocket, which means you think it's expensive. Whether you know it's expensive or not is irrelevant. You think it's expensive, so you're not selling it. So Roger, being a leader, go price shop. Go get me 10 prices of cabin filters from around. If we are outrageously overpriced, I'll adjust the pricing. So a couple days goes by. This is Roger communicating the story here. But a couple days goes by and the service advisor doesn't say anything. And Roger's like, hey, it's been a couple days. What's going on? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it means he found an answer that he didn't like, right? You and I, but I saw your face when Roger made the statement. It's like, well, he found a price that he didn't like. Well, that's because everybody else around was way more expensive. They were actually at a Chevy dealer, just like you are, Richard. They were very competitively priced, and in all likelihood, they were the least expensive out of all of that, and it included labor. So the question about pricing in this regard is, do your advisors understand who they're selling to, and do they understand the competitive nature that the pricing that you have structured is? Meaning, if you're a Chevy store, like Richard is, like Roger is, what is the other Chevy store that's close to you, that's relevant? What are they priced at for whatever you're looking at? In this circumstance, we were talking about cabin filters. And alternatively, what are the independents priced at for that same thing? Now, there are all kinds of ways that you can do that. You can pay your service advisors. As a service leader, you can pay your service advisors to make a couple of phone calls to say, hey, how much is this? Or you can pay for services that do it for you, like IntelliCheck or like Dynatron or other software platforms like that. They will go out and do shops for you to tell you what your pricing is compared to them. Cool thing, easy injection here. FixOps Marketing has done a collaboration and partnership with IntelliJect. We now have a Dare to Compare platform through FixOps Marketing so that you, as a service leader, can put competitive pricing on your website and show what the alternatives are for a select few options that you think are the most important for you. Obviously, we suggest a few things, but when we're talking about pricing, this is the things that we can do or you can do. So to that point, we got into, Roger was talking about how he prices specifically. Now, he was a little bit different. I hadn't heard it done this way, which was gross profit, basing on gross profit percentage on technicians. TC brought up the fact that your overall technician efficiency will affect this too much, which is why they don't do it that way. Would you agree with that?
No, because the tech is always going to be efficient with an oil change, right? It's just pull the vehicle in, rack it, put it in the air. Like, I can tell you my process for the vehicle has never changed. Pull it in, I do my light check, I check my wiper blades, run the windows up and down as I'm pulling the vehicle in, rack the vehicle, and then as the oil is draining, that's where you do your quick visual inspection. So efficiency from a standpoint there, that doesn't jive with me. Whereas, like, the other thing that got me on Roger's side as well is I would love to see the price of his oil change, because by going with gross, generally, like, if your highest paid guy is doing an oil change, your gross takes a massive dump in the bucket, right? Like, it drops significantly. So if he's pricing it off of what his highest paid guy makes, then his gross is going to take a massive hit that way, right? Especially if you want to remain competitive with an oil change. An oil change, in my opinion, is a loss leader. Like, you're not really going to make money off an oil change, but you're doing it so you can get your hands on the vehicle and make sure that the customer is driving, a safe, dependable, and reliable vehicle.
Now, he did say that he said he has a mechanical labor rate and a maintenance repair rate. I didn't hear diagnostic, I didn't hear diesel, I didn't hear anything else. Like, he has a mechanical repair rate and a maintenance repair rate. Do you guys have that at your store?
No,
same.
We have two rates. We have our basic, like, gas model, everything goes, that's one standard labor rate, and then we have what we call a high diag or an EV or diesel rate. Those three, like, your check engine lights, that type of stuff, that your diagnostic stuff falls into that, EV repairs and diesel repairs, because those are always more complicated when it comes to it. So we run two different labor rates. We used to be tiered labor, and then we had to get rid of that. But so it was like, if you did an oil change, you made labor rate C. If you did a menu price item, like, a brake service and a brake flush, or like a driveline service, anything like that, you got paid labor rate B. And then anything that was like warranty or highline repair, like engine replacements, rebuilding differentials, transmissions, anything that actually, like, takes a good amount of skill set, that was labor rate A. But then, so that brought our overall cost of labor down. But at the end of the day, we had to get rid of it because it affected the warranty, like, rate review process. But yeah, it's different there. Like, you can run, the majority of our services go to the lube rack, and our guys are paid a lower rate there, so then the gross doesn't take such a hit. But if they find anything like that, that's when a tech is called over. A tech is called over to look at the vehicle and do their quotes and call whatever work is found on the vehicle at that point in time. Now, I pay my techs 0.2 per call over. If lube tech goes and grabs the tech, they get paid 0.2 just to basically walk out of their bay, look at the vehicle, do a quick estimate, and then back to the work they go. So
nice.
I take them, yeah.
Well, we're talking about a pricing debrief, but we got a little tidbit in there about mentorship and paying for mentorship within a shop. So that's a key part of that process, to make sure that nothing is missed, to keep the customer safe, right? We don't want to miss anything for the customer. We want to keep them safe, but we also don't want to burden the journey techs who are highly paid on efficiency and productivity. We don't want to kill them by going, hey, can you look at this? Hey, can you look at this? Hey, can you look at this? You have to be appropriate with it, both from a business standpoint as well as a mentorship and growing your shop standpoint. You want to be that shop that everybody wants to work for, right? And being able to pay that is a key ingredient. Now, when it comes to, I'd like to touch on that a little bit because some folks don't understand this. A lot of technicians don't, that you had to stop a labor rate process because of how it affected your warranty. So can you touch on that real quick and describe for folks who have never heard that concept before what that entails?
So you have your retail door rate and then you have your warranty door rate, and those two never coincide with each other. And that I know with GM, they take several things into factor on that side. They take how much you're paying your technicians. They take a general overall average of the wage. They look at your rent. They look at a lot of your fixed ops costs, and then they see how much you're charging customers for your straight labor rate, and then they base it off of that. So we found out that with our labor pay matrix, what was happening is that because we were averaging down so much, that they took the lowest amount for what we were paying our guys. So they took our C-level rate and said, okay, that's how much you're paying your guys on average. So your door rate's this, your average pay rate is this. That brought our overall percentage down. So our warranty, the first time we did it, they were like, okay, well, we'll do a warranty labor rate review, but it's going to go down. And we were like, well, why is it going down? And then they explained why it was going to go down. So that's when we eliminated the warranty or the labor pay process between the three different pay scales.
Gotcha.
Overall satisfaction with our techs went up on that one because, you would hand a ticket to a tech and it would be like, there'd be an oil change, a tire rotation, and then a few menu priced items, and they would look at it and they would go, oh, I'm only making, I'm making 75% of my labor rate doing these services. So, I just got to hammer through them because I'm losing money, right? So it brought the overall attitude up in the shop. So it was pretty big on that aspect. And then increasing all that brought our warranty labor rate up. And I think with GM, they say you can do it as many times in a year as you want, but they'll only actually do it, I think, 3 times. They'll bump it 3 times in 1 year period.
I think different across North America. Every country is different and every state is different because I'm fairly confident that in the States that each state has a different law.
Yeah.
And how often you can claim it, because there are states that can only do it once a year, I believe, if I remember what Zach said and what Brad Pascal was saying. It's like there's only some states can only allow you to do it once a year. That's pretty heavy. If you can only do it once a year, so you got to have your ducks in a row to make sure you get as much as you possibly can out of that. And overall, that affects, we're talking about pricing, but pricing overall affects technician pay. Right? When we're talking about warranty rates, door rates, pricing matrices and stuff, having a multi-tiered pricing structure might help you sell some of the time. And a lot of leaders are going, well, if I don't have a multi-tiered pricing structure, I'm losing business because the customers who are on the fence, shall we say, about buying from you in some capacity on some work order, wherever, are going to say no because you're not offering that third tier labor rate. Right? Well, what you're looking at, and this is why we talk about delta so often on SDL and so often on wrench turners, is that the delta difference matters. Right? When you're talking about the difference in how many customers are you going to lose on a sale because you don't have that third tier pricing structure versus how much more are you going to be profitable over the long period of time because you now only have 2. They're more profitable because they stay at that level. And more importantly, when you go in to do your warranty labor rate submission to increase your warranty labor rate, how much more money you're going to make on the warranty labor rate over across the year because it's such a big portion of your year of labor, right? It brings more opportunities, it brings better labor, more labor rates, higher labor rates allow us to pay our technicians more. So you got to take all of that all into account when you're looking at pricing, especially when you're looking at matrix, because like Richard just said, sometimes having multi-tiers or having really value menu, economy value menu stuff might actually be a detriment to you long term. So one of the other things that was brought up, and this is less about pricing and more about conversation, and you and I both have a different perhaps opinion on it during the conversation, but at the same point, it's important that words matter. So when we're talking about words, AJ has this great document, words matter document, that I'm going to see if AJ will be happy to share that publicly outside of the family, because that's kind of his bread and butter. But if y'all aren't looking at the words you use both in the shop when you communicate with advisors, and advisors communicating with technicians, but communicating with the customers, what are the things that you've used from that document, Richard, that have really helped you?
The biggest one was required, right? Like going from recommend to required. That was a pivotal mindset change with all my techs in the shop, because it was like, oh, we're recommending all this maintenance and it's never getting sold. We're recommending. And I turned to them and said, okay, well, if I turn to you and I say, yeah, we recommend a tire rotation, what immediately goes in your mind? And they're like, well, I don't have to do it right now. It's like, exactly. Like, recommending is you're giving somebody like advice, right? We don't always take people's advice, but if you're turning to a customer and saying, your vehicle requires a brake service, it requires a tire rotation, you require an alignment, that really that removes the guesswork out of it. It's not that it removes the choice that the customer, because the customer still has, at the end of the day, they have their choice if they're going to service with you or not. But what it does is it makes your opinion almost kind of not so absolute, but it's a little more firm in that aspect, is that, you're not recommending services. These are things that your vehicle requires to keep it on the road, to keep it running, right? I always talk to customers, always ask me, like, oh, well, how do I get a vehicle to last 10 years? Do the required maintenance, We used to...
It's not recommended, it's required maintenance.
You want to... I have a customer he's got a 2013 Duramax, and he's got 780,000 kilometers on it. And that's his second truck. His first truck has 1.5 million on it. And he's like, and everybody's like, well, how does that truck last? I'm like, because he maintains it. Every time he brings his truck in, if we find any issues with it or anything like that, he takes care of it right then and there. There's no question. Like, that's, you want to get a vehicle to, $1 million, take care of it. That's, I can vouch for that, because I got a 2013 Nissan Rogue sitting in my driveway that my daughter's gonna inherit here. It's got 570,000 on the vehicle.
And folks, that's not Freedom Units. That is Monopoly metrics. So it's 570,000 kilometers.
Which
okay,
is that's like 4 miles.
It's like 4. It's like 4 miles. Yeah, it's about that.
But that's the biggest thing. Like, it's the word shifting, and you can, in the shop, that's the big thing for me becoming a leader, is watching my tone, cadence, and inflection when I'm talking with my technicians. Back in the day when I was just generic tech, you're dropping F-bombs all the time, you're shooting the crap, you're just pissing around, doing what you do, and then slowly, like, as time goes and you become a leader, your tone and cadence and inflection and how you converse with your techs makes a huge difference. But that even comes with customers, right? Like, being able to build rapport with your customers, then you can talk about pricing as much as you want, because your customers trust you, right? Mm-hmm. Rapport is a big thing, and then pricing doesn't really matter so much, I think, and that's where the embarrassment thing from what Roger was talking about really kind of touched base to me. Like, if you're, even as a tech, if you're embarrassed to talk to a customer about, even where you work, that's the one thing that I never want my techs to feel is, I want them to, because we've all worked for places where, you're with a group of people and they ask where you work or what you do, and you really don't want to say it because you're embarrassed by what it is. So, but again, that falls back to pricing, right? So
100%.
That really resonated with me, was like, they got to be proud of where they work and who they represent at the end of the day.
And why things are priced the way they are, right? Having the team involved in not necessarily choosing what it is, but understanding how it is that the pricing has come to be what it is, right? Understanding that, this is coming back to understanding and knowing the numbers, right? We talk about this on a regular basis on SDL, knowing your numbers. As a technician, you should understand. And I can't remember was it you that asked it in the chat? It's like, Who here actually knows what your store's door rate, your door labor rate, your door warranty rate, your effective labor rate, and basic time structures and pricing for basic maintenance is? If you don't know what those things are, you need to shut up. Like, you really need to stop complaining about why things are priced the way they are. If you don't know what the basics are coming through the door, what your customers see every day, stop complaining about it. Get to know what it is first. Then do your own shops. Do your own dare to compare and price out the local competition. Understand why your store is priced the way it is. Then go talk to your boss. It's like, hey, I did a shop on these 5 stores. We're 25% higher than all of them. I'm having difficulty making money in here. You guys pay me well, you train me well, but I'm only getting 7 to 8 hours a day. I'm a level 3 tech. I've been in this business 10 years. I need to be like 12, 14, 16 hours a day. I can crush that out, not a problem. But we're having trouble selling work. And we're 25% higher than the competition. This is why doing the due diligence, I realize it's not your job to do that, but guess what? If you want to make more money, you got to invest some time, energy, and effort into getting better and making more money. So know your numbers. If you don't know your numbers, figure it out. You need to spend some time. And if you don't know how to understand those numbers, or just ask. And sometimes all you have to do is ask, and they'll just tell you. But if they won't, that's a bit of a red flag. But. So to that point, you brought up recommend to required. And obviously context matters, and the words that go with recommend versus required matter. The other thing that Barrich brought up many moons ago, which I've tried to instill into a lot of folks, is the secondary aspect to that is there are parts that you don't recommend, and there are things that you don't require. There are things that you pass or fail, right? There's no longer a line where you can recommend tires at a certain point. You can require tires at a certain point. The cool thing is there are certain times that you can use pass or fail. Tires pass to a point and then they fail. Mm-hmm. It's no longer a recommended or a required. They fail. They're no longer safe. It's not that they're required. They fail. They are unsafe. Your tie rod ends have an allowable tolerance in certain aspects. Some of them have more than others. At some point, they pass or they fail. Use that verbiage in your VMPIs. Use that verbiage in your notes, in your work orders. Use that verbiage in written MPIs. Use that language, pass or fail, when appropriate, but you'll find you will sell more work because you are telling the customer exactly what you mean. You're not trying to sell. You're not trying to influence. It is you being the professional, knowing the material, and telling them that you've inspected and it fails. Communicating that way is a professional way of making someone understand you know what you're talking about. We're talking about pricing. We're still talking about safety. We're still talking about selling. So to that point, Richard, what's one last thing that you think some folks should take away from today's SDL and pricing?
Don't race to the bottom. I think Ray and me talked about that, or Ray brought that up on a LinkedIn post with a glass repair for his Mercedes store. And that, I don't know what it is about this industry, but the race to the bottom is just, there's always, what is it? You can have it cheap and fast, but it won't be quality. The cheap, fast, The cheap,
fast, cheap, or reliable, I think is reliable. The common race term.
Or quality is the other one. It's that triangle, right? You can have it. You can have it cheap and fast, but it won't be quality. You can have it fast and quality, but it won't be cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the biggest thing. But that was that you can price yourself too high and be out of the market, but then the whole pricing yourself too low can push you out of the market as well. So that was high you can always adjust for, but I think once you get so low, there's really then you come back and that's when customers they're coming to you because you're cheap, right? Mm-hmm. And that's if being in a dealership, you don't want to be known as cheap. You want to be known as the professionals, and you pay for professional, right? You don't pay, you don't go and find some Joe Blow who's standing outside of Home Depot to come and wire your house. So
yeah, Jeff Compton talks about that all the time. He's a big proponent of trying to get not necessarily content, although it is content to a point. He wants to get as many DIYers out as humanly possible. Get Get the cars fixed by professionals across the board. Understandably, different countries have different policies. The US does not have the regulation that we do here in Canada. I wouldn't necessarily say that we have better technicians here in Canada. It's just more regulated and so forth. There's liabilities and insurances that applies in both circumstances. I think there's more liability and so on and so forth here in Canada about technicians being professionals and having theoretically the training to do it properly and safely. Again, talking about pricing, get what you pay for. If you're trying to run a shop with 20 technicians and 19 of them have less than 3 years, you're going to have problems dealing with comebacks, right? You need to have an appropriate mix between journey and green. You got to have an appropriate mix, and there's a stacked in there. I find that it's usually 10-1. You need to have somebody that's got 20 years in, and you can have 10 people with 5 years or less. That ratio, give or take, gets you a half decent mix, because obviously not everybody's going to be 5 years or less in that 10, but generally speaking, that's a fairly good mix in that regard. Because then you'll have technicians mix in there on top. You'll have the 10-year tech, the 15-year tech that's mixed in there. But you need to have somebody that's got the equivalent of 20 years in, mixed in with 10 technicians who have 5 years or less. That gets you a good enough mix with experience to build your own bucket, because not every one of those 10 are going to stick around. Pricing matters, because you're going to get people, if your door rate and your pricing on your menu priced items, if your pricing isn't proper, you're not going to keep technicians. Right? Because you're not charging enough, it means you're not paying enough, right? And that's where the pricing matrix really comes in. So that's cool. I think that's good. I think that's good. Closing remarks, Richard. What do you got?
I would say from techs, learn what your door rate is. Ask. Don't guess what your door rate is. Ask what your door rate is. Ask your service manager what your effective labor rate is. Learn what these terms are. That's going to make you a better technician to understand that pricing matrix of the business, right? You should treat your bay like a business, like your own little personal business, right? You should treat it like that as such. And understanding the pricing will make it make more sense. And from a technician standpoint, what I think they need to get out of their own head is any percentages, right? You always hear it thrown around like, oh, a tech should be making, 30% of the door rate, or 40% of the door rate, or 50% of the door rate. The techs really need to get that out of their mindset, because they're not the ones running the business, right? They don't have to pay the rent. They don't have to pay the insurance. They don't have to pay the parts inventory, anything like that. They don't have to pay the floor rate on all the vehicles that are sitting on the floor. But again, technicians, educate yourselves. You need to be educated on your door rate, on what ELR is. Ask questions. Don't an open business and honest, a good leader, a good manager will turn around and say, oh, you want to know all the numbers? Here you go. And then it's, once it's open, it can never be closed. It's a little bit of a Pandora's box in that matter. But don't be scared to ask questions. Find out what your door rate is. Find out, get a menu price printout from your service manager, and then you can see how much labor does an oil change pay, how much labor does an alignment pay, how much tech should know all of this, and that will play directly into the pricing. And technicians should know, right? From a technician standpoint, if you don't know, ask. And like you had mentioned there, if you think the shop is too high, do your own shopping around, do your price shopping, and that will open your eyes to how competitive you actually are.
Also shows how much of a leader you want to become. One of the things that, just before we sign off here, your effort into being part of the business and being an invaluable asset, someone who's willing to put in the work to find out those things, that's leadership mentality. There's a reason why I started the Sweaty Leader group chat, is because I want folks to understand what it takes to become a leader. You need to just take that step off the bench and out. And it's not so much just literally coming off the bench, but it's taking a step back, looking at everything around you, knowing what's in the marketplace, not just speculation based on what the other complaining techs are talking about, but understanding what's in the marketplace for pricing, for payments, for door rates, for manufacturers, and understanding not just from your perspective, but from as much perspective as you can get, because that becomes an invaluable asset to the business. You become an invaluable asset to the business, and that's how you become a leader. So on that note, that's a great debrief for today's SDL. And remember, folks, this is going to go out midweek. So this is Sunday, right after SDL. This is going to go at midweek. Y'all are watching this midweek. This coming Sunday is going to be the follow-up to last week or the week before, where we talked about comebacks. And we are trying to create a comeback process for leaders to use in their stores through SDL. So we've got, on average, there's like 30 to 35 people every week in SDL. Sometimes we've had as high as 50 in the room. Everybody's a fixed ops professional in some regard, either has experience in it or now services it in some capacity where they provide a service or a product to fixed ops. So everybody in there is trying to help fixed ops. So next week, comebacks, part 2. Is going to be next week. There is already a document created that I've created based on everybody's input over time and so on and so forth that we're editing and trying to get nailed down so that everybody has access to it. Reach out if you want access to that document. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. Hope you all subscribe, watch, listen, learn, comment down below, like it, give you the thumbs up down below. That helps the channel. And as always, negative pushes, positive pulls, and always clean your toys before you put them away.